So I'd like to welcome everybody to today's event, the first Industry Insight of 2023. I'm Wendy Dietzler, Director of Events and Education for Trade Press Media Group. We're really glad to see you all here today. Now, before we get started with today's event, let's just get a few of those housekeeping details out of the way. You heard as you came into the room, my colleague Paul talk about how we can ask questions throughout the webcast. We want to know what you need to know, so please use those tools to ask questions. And you can submit them by navigating to that Q&A button. It's at the bottom of your screen. Type in your questions at any time. We'll take them as we can, and by the end, we will hopefully have gotten through most of them. We've got a number of learning objectives for today's event. You're going to hear them in the feedback and the interaction with our panelists. We're going to really look at what today's current HVAC landscape looks like, talk a little bit about those efficiency standards, talk about how return to work is impacting everything that the HVAC system is being tasked with. And then we want to talk about how data is making inroads into our overall utilization of these systems and how we can better use that for predictive and preventive maintenance. And let's talk about the technology side. There's some exciting things happening, and I can't wait to hear more about that. So throughout this session, you'll have the opportunity as well to offer CEUs. About 24 hours after we wrap up today, you're going to receive an email with a link to an online assessment. Just a few short questions, and if you answer them correctly, you'll get your CEU certificate. I have faith. We're also going to archive this webcast at facilitiesnet.com/webcasts. So you can go back and review this and go back over some of the key points we'll be sharing. Finally, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Aerco, a Watts brand, and TMA Systems. They're the ones who are making today possible. So thank you very, very much for your support. Now let's meet our panelists. Our two panelists today are Joe McVeigh and Neri Hernandez. Neri is Senior Project Manager, Hydronic Solutions for Watts Water Technologies. He joined Aerco in 2010 and has had a number of roles in their engineering and product management teams, working with Watts teams to develop leading commercial hydronic heating products that allow HVAC design engineers to optimize system, design, and performance. Joe McVeigh is a product manager for TMA Systems, and he's responsible for gathering feedback from customers and planning product roadmaps. Joe has more than 10 years experience in the CMMS industry, including 7 years as a senior implementation consultant for TMA. I like to call these two our dream team. So let's get to it. We're going to go right into the discussion. But before we get into any questions, Joe, I'd love to hear just a quick hello from you and maybe a quick overview of what you're trying to accomplish as we get our conversation started.
Yeah. Thanks for the introduction. Happy to be here today. So again, a product manager at TMA Systems. So we are a computerized maintenance management system. So we work an awful lot with customers that are trying to optimize their maintenance strategies, and HVAC equipment being, really chief among them. So we're constantly trying to help our customers move from more of a preventive to a predictive maintenance strategy. And a big part of that is the hardware and the manufacturer installers that needs to be there in order to kind of work with our system and integrate with WebTMA, our flagship product. So I'm happy to be part of this conversation.
Thank you. Happy you're here, Joe. Neri, let's hear from you. I'd love to hear a little bit about your objectives for today and a little more about what you're doing at Aerco.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good afternoon, and thank you for the introduction. So as mentioned, Neri Hernandez, Senior Product Manager for Watts Water Technologies. Mainly my focus is on hydronic heating products, and the things that we're looking for besides optimizing our products and also helping engineers on how to best apply our products for maximum efficiency and performance. We're also working using the power of the cloud to create predictive maintenance tools as well for existing customers, and they can get there are ways to optimize, and hopefully we can discuss that more in this discussion.
Absolutely. I think I'm hearing a lot of help is coming our way, which is great. Let's dig right into that first topic. We went through for everybody in our audience, we went through a little bit of an outline and kind of prioritized some topics we wanted to start with today. One of them is efficiency standards. That's where I think a lot of people need help. They change. Some of them are at very high levels. Some of them are more robust. So let's talk a little bit about the 2023 DOE efficiency standards and what that means for people sitting in our audience today and for HVAC operations in general. Neri, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of refresh everyone what the new standards are, at least what kicked in this month in regards to commercial boilers. Anything below 2,500 MBH, I believe the new minimum efficiency standard is 85%. Anything above that is 84%. So how does that impact you today, or what you're doing at your facility? Actually, does not. If your operation is not affected by that, it really comes into any new boilers. So if you have a product, right, that it needs to be replaced, that new boiler has to be above that minimum threshold now. So that might impact just your planning. There are, if you are looking to replace something that was exactly like what you had, but it doesn't meet that standard, you're just not going to be able to do that. But if you are, looking for a new product to replace, then, it's an opportunity to, maybe put something that's high efficiency. There's generous rebates out there as well. There's incentives for that. And it's just an opportunity to just, improve your overall system performance. But I hope that offers a little bit of clarity on the new DOE efficiency standards.
Yeah, it's good to kind of see that line of distinction. Joe, what are you seeing on your side in regards to that specific standard?
Yeah, so it's really important for us from the kind of software perspective that we work with the installers and, with the existing equipment that you already have, that we have that data available and easily accessible in WebTMA. And especially if we kind of integrate and we're seeing some of the energy usage, that you can kind of measure some of that based on your different buildings and what you have with the different equipment that's installed. So helping customers kind of measure that efficiency against all the other equipment that they have in their buildings that's consuming energy as well. So I would say, yeah, making sure that you get that nameplate information of all the old equipment, but certainly the new equipment. So work with those installers. Make sure you have that in your CMMS or work order system, because with all the other data that we have, placing that alongside some of that other data and an analytics platform can give you some really great insights of what you want to do across your campus or specific buildings. So
yeah. Joe, are you seeing any other efficiency standards? Are you hearing about any other efficiency standards coming online? Is there anything long range that you and your customers might be planning for?
So that's where a lot of times we lean on our customers to kind of tell us what's coming up next, and we lean on the installers and folks like Neri to make sure that we're prepared to have reporting capabilities to help them adjust in any way they need to.
So you're responding to what they're asking for. Neri, are you hearing anything else? I mean, these 2023 DOE standards are certainly very fresh, but are there more in the pipeline, or do you anticipate anything else in this area?
Absolutely. And as Joe mentioned, we do rely on our customers, our users, to tell us when something might be coming, even if it's just in the early development, it's maybe an early commentary stage, but at least that allows us to plan accordingly. But also, it kind of touches base, everything that we do on our side is high efficiency. So are we on the right track, which is good. We do see things coming up at the local level, at least from the states. I think they're going to require more stringent efficiency. So that's key. We even see it international. I'm not sure if there are folks from Canada, but my understanding is Canada, beginning in 2025, their energy codes will require minimum 90% efficiency, which really pushes everything to high efficiency condensing, which is good. There's really advantages with going with condensing technology. You can really overall, and also, looking on the discussion of carbon footprint, right? I think there's opportunities to reduce your overall carbon footprint by going with such a high efficiency product. But we're always on the lookout. I think key, there's the federal guidelines, but key too is there's going to be more. I expect the states to implement more local, stricter requirements, and that's something that we're very cognizant of. And I'm sure we're going to talk into about the tools available, right? Am I getting that performance, and what can I do to get there if I'm not there yet?
Absolutely. And to everybody sitting in today, you heard it here. I mean, you are an amazing resource back to your technology and solution providers. So those conversations are just mutually beneficial, and hopefully we can keep those going. We're off to a fresh start for 2023. And speaking of fresh starts, a lot of our organizations, a lot of people here today in this call are looking at return to work. And we've been kind of approaching that as a phased in, but I think everybody's sensing there's a stronger, more consistent return to work happening across a lot of enterprises in our country and globally. Joe, talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing on those shifting occupancy rates, the technology that your organization can use to bolster that and really make that a successful transition.
Sure. So, we all hear the buzzword of IoT and Internet of Things. So this is really a crucial tool for us in helping our customers be a lot more efficient in terms of kind of integrating with those building automation systems. So, if people aren't occupying certain rooms, or if maybe they're not coming in till later in the day, whatever that is, we see it a lot with college campuses. They don't have classes scheduled till 10 a.m. Well, maybe we don't need to be turning on the air conditioning at 8 a.m. So making sure that all those systems are integrated so that we're only using the energy and the systems we need when we actually need them. So IoT is a big part of this. So integrating occupancy sensors with those building automation systems is a really, really key component of something we try to help with. So occupancy sensors, it's a big trend right now.
Absolutely. Mary, what about you on your end, the scaling of things? I mean, how are you working to adapt that way as well? The technology that you have to share and make available.
So our products are, take our flagship boilers. They're already by default set up to integrate with any building automation system.
Okay.
So whether that's setback schedules, lowering set points, we even have summer modes, right, to optimize the function of the equipment. But even we do recognize that a lot of commercial facilities also don't have a sophisticated building automation system at times, or it's in their plans. Our controls are set up to accommodate those folks as well. With already built, setback schedules is one. You can schedule different set points at different points in the day. There's also the using the power of the cloud, the equipment will trend, what days operating, what efficiency is achieving at those points of the day. And, you could, as a facilities manager, look at that and say, well, there aren't really folks at this time, I could really play around with my settings and just, not supply as much heat as needed, or just supply if you have a combination plan, which is just your boiler with an indirect water heater. Just, you set it up so that it's just supplying your domestic, not so much on the space heating side. So we've been expanding our control capability to support with that, but can easily integrate into, any building automation system. The product by default communicates Modbus or BACnet too, which is fairly popular.
Yeah. As we're starting to bring these, these enterprises and these commercial buildings and all, buildings back to life with more occupancy, I think with that comes some existing growing concern and asking for reassurance about safe air, good filtration, mitigation, that helps prevent COVID or anything at this point that, could be transmittable. So, Joe, I'm wondering, what are you hearing from customers relative to those concerns and how the HVAC system can help respond to that or really can help play a role in creating a greater peace of mind?
Sure. So as we dealt with the COVID mitigation measures and things like that, one big trend is we see a lot more expensive filters and a lot more expensive equipment being installed to ensure the air quality. So kind of from our end of things, of just tracking the maintenance and replacing those filters, as you think of your materials are that much more expensive, your repairs are that much more expensive. We're trying to give good data and through those building automation systems of let's just make sure we only replace this stuff when we need to. So if we're spending twice as much on the materials we're using to make sure that we have extra clean air, let's make sure that we're not doing things too frequently. So having some of those sensors in place that can tell us when a filter is dirty, that's that predictive maintenance side of things. So let's replace it exactly when we need to, and not necessarily just based on that kind of calendar recommendation. So maybe it isn't quarterly, maybe it's every 4.5 months. You expand that across a campus, large health system, things like that with those really expensive parts. you're saving quite a bit of money. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a great way to use data. Talk about cost savings. That's a crystal clear example of that success. Neri, on your end, what are you hearing from that kind of that COVID mitigation piece and general heating, cooling, what your facility needs to do, not just to keep people comfortable, but again, to help provide that reassurance?
No, absolutely. And there are things that, if you're not careful, could really impact your efficiency. So it's a matter of striking that balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you expand greater airflow across your air ventilation system, that might cause to increase flow into, the heat exchange in your air ducts, which, if you're not careful, right, you could really impact the efficiency of the equipment. So I think just power of data, just seeing, okay, where am I at with all these adjustments that I've made, and I can go back and then, make sure I'm not sacrificing my efficiency. You can reach a balance for sure. We do feel that. I do think that's just going to become more important, just tracking, and there's things we can do also from, our controls perspective, right? There are circumstances where our equipment is controlling the pump. So we just try to mitigate, right? Besides the electrical consumption, we can reduce the flow to when it's just, reduce it so that, less electrical consumption, better efficiency on the boiler, lower firing rate. But if you have high demand, high occupancy, you want to increase, it'll respond accordingly. So it's more intelligent control, if you will. So, and I think it's just going to become, technology. I think the industry is going in the way of the car, right? There's so much lines of code, but it's really just making it, much more smarter, if you will, and learning your system and, and telling you, hey, you can take steps to do things to improve as well.
That's great. Joe, let's talk a little bit about challenges you're seeing in the HVAC industry, specifically to where you are and what you're hearing from the team there.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say, and it kind of harkens back to an earlier question, and Neri was talking about, the changing efficiency standards and things like that. But we have a lot of customers that will have very old equipment, and then they'll have new construction. So they're integrating all sorts of different systems.
Sure.
It's just bringing everything up to that same kind of level of, especially as we try to move into that predictive maintenance, the smart maintenance, as Neri is talking about. How do we take the pneumatic old systems that we had and integrate those things into the more advanced building automation systems that can be a lot smarter? So from our perspective, we just want to kind of get those alarms. So if there is a fault alarm that we're getting from the building automation system, we want to receive that and create a work order. And then we leave the kind of complex integration between those systems that sends us that alarm to those manufacturers and installers.
Yeah. So that's a great tool. And I think, Neri, early on, you were talking about, an opportunity today to talk about that. On your end, tools are out there for that performance data, that preventive maintenance analysis. Let's talk a little bit about that. Where do you think those biggest benefits can be utilized?
Well, I think, building on the power of the cloud, right, and the Internet of Things, every device today is coming with some form, whether it's Wi-Fi or direct, hardwire Ethernet connection. We're seeing with all the instrumentation that's already added to the equipment, right? If you set up an account, it'll just, tell you, right, how you're operating, your average hourly cycles, temperatures, efficiencies. And the nice thing too, it keeps a history of it. But I think the big benefit really is in the background, it's running analytics of this data. And it's really advising you, we want to empower folks so that they take preventative action versus reactive actions, right? So it's just monitoring all its internal instrumentation. And if something, I'll give an example, say a valve, the gas valve is taking a little bit longer to open than usual, right? It's just a sign of wear and tear. Eventually it's going to fail, things like that. So, all right, I know it's taking longer. I got maybe 3 months. I'll just schedule ahead, get it replaced, rather than, wait till it actually happens. And then you got, unplanned piece of equipment that's down. So, and the same goes with efficiency, right? If you are, not achieving, 95%, that was your target, might be far less. It'll also advise you, maybe adjust your reset schedule. Here are steps you can take to lower your return water temperature as well, so that you get more condensing out of the equipment. That's another example. And I think overall, I think the industry is just going to expand on that capability. Yeah. But those tools already exist today. It's just, a matter of connecting to the internet and, setting up your account with your equipment.
So with those tools, and it is amazing now, the tools allow the data to come to us, to the facility professional, versus necessarily having to track them down as much. Let's talk a little bit about the frequency, how you evaluate the data. How often should you be kind of checking into those trend lines? Are we talking about, looking from a year perspective or a daily perspective? That's a huge range. So Joe, let's talk a little bit about how we use that data. What's a good pace? I imagine it might be system dependent, but maybe some general guidelines for that.
Yeah, so part of the challenge is, we oftentimes will rely on the equipment installers and manufacturers to kind of tailor those fault alarms to tell us when there's, at what point do we actually go and take a preventive action, and hopefully not a reactive action like Neri was describing. But in advance of that, a lot of our customers don't have all of that calibrated properly. So we can set up processes within, a CMMS system to start analyzing. And I would do this as frequently as you possibly can. But certainly like monthly, I would be trying to look and see, did I have any failures that I didn't anticipate? So we would track those with work order types, failure codes, things like that. And then I just do a quick analysis of, well, what is my frequency for maintaining this equipment? How many failures am I seeing? I'm not checking this frequently enough if I'm seeing a lot of these failures. And honestly, the opposite is true. So labor is an important resource too. If I'm not seeing many failures and I'm checking something all the time, maybe I'm going too frequently, and I could save a little bit of labor resources by kind of tapering back a little bit. But in a perfect world, if everything's calibrated properly, we rely on those equipment manufacturers and installers to give us that fault alarm just in time, so that we're sending the person to take that preventive measure just right before we see any kind of equipment failure.
Yeah. Would you say something similar, Neri, relative to the tracking and the pacing of checking your data?
Yeah, I would agree with Joe. I think at the very least, monthly is probably a good start. But it's really depending on just your facility, your needs. Yeah. If you've got, maybe your equipment's being used for a process, right, industrial process, then maybe it's going to be weekly, right, because it's more critical. But at the very least, if it's, commercial building, just standard vanilla space heating, at least a month. And the nice thing too is, with our cloud-based service, you can set up how often you receive, do you want a weekly alert or do you want a monthly alert? And then two, you can set your averages of, same with efficiency, what's my weekly or what's been my monthly, right? But at the very least, I would recommend, check back how you're doing on a month-to-month basis, for sure.
Yeah. So along with that, we're kind of talking about some of that staffing potential, headcount staffing, kind of, priority when it comes to aligning that with data. What else should our facility managers, our facility professionals look to be prioritizing when they're looking at their HVAC maintenance program? Joe, is there anything you're seeing based on what you're seeing through the CMMS window?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one for me?
Sure. We're talking about prioritizing the HVAC maintenance program. Where do you, what floats to the top of the list? What's a little lower than that? Just what you're seeing through that CMMS window.
Sure. So it depends a little bit on the industry. And I would say, we work with a lot of healthcare customers. So HVAC equipment is critical in healthcare for a number of reasons. But yeah, it's anything in that kind of regulatory space of fire protection, but also the air cleanliness. And then in healthcare, we mentioned the kind of negative pressure spaces and things like that. So life safety is always the thing that we want to focus on the most. And then, from there, for just kind of generic, just facilities management customers, I would start with the most expensive and then kind of work my way down. So, some of the large boilers that Neri's talking about, chillers, on some of that critical equipment, the pumps down there in your mechanical spaces. I would start there and then worry about some of the fan coil units and unit heaters, some of the other stuff that's a little cheaper. I worry about that last. So start with the big stuff that's expensive and then kind of move on from there.
Money talks, right?
Yeah, of course.
Neri, are you seeing something similar when you're talking about those priorities within what's happening there at Aerco? Where do you see the biggest benefit to prioritize HVAC maintenance and the like?
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot with what Joe said. Life safety is always critical, but also observing what are your facilities' needs, right? Usually there is some built-in redundancy with a lot of plants when they're designed. So, you have to decide if the alert is on something that could cause it to, break down, be decommissioned. You kind of have to weigh, is it going to really impact the capabilities of my plant, or can I have some redundancy, it should get me through, or, you are a medical facility and there's a big storm coming, temperatures are going to plummet. It's like, no, I really don't have, so I want to, invest in that right away.
Yeah.
So it's really going to be tailored to your needs, but a lot of the building on what I said earlier, a lot of our tools are really meant to advise you on certain things, right? If you see certain instrumentation degradation, well, you might have, a couple of weeks or, at least 3 months, so you can plan accordingly. Doesn't, you can focus on more of the important things. Or if it's just, something that goes down and you don't have extra capacity, then you should plan just accordingly to get that resolved.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're at a point where we can probably take a few questions from the audience if you guys are game. And they're going to probably speak a little what we've covered a few minutes ago as to what we're also going to get to. We talked a little bit about this question early on, but let's see if there's anything more specific, or maybe a specific resource we could point Rob to. He wants to know about the new product efficiency minimums and rebate standards. Where should people start to look for those standards offered by utility or any of those programs? Would they just start with their own utility, or would they be looking to the manufacturer for a little more information? I'm going to throw that one up as a jump ball, and one of you guys can take it.
I will let Neri start with that one. Yeah, hopefully he has a better answer than what I will think of. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So I'm happy to share that. You can start with the manufacturer. Like in our case, if you go on our website, based on the zip code, if you enable geolocation in your browser or phone, it'll tell you for equipment what's available, rebates available. And and a lot of the utilities have really nice optimized tools in the background where, depending where you are, from our website, you could jump directly to the application form, right? You just bought a brand new boiler, you're not sure. Visit our website, aerco.com. Oh yeah, I'm eligible for, $5,000. Oh, I can fill out the form. You can submit it right there. So we've really set out to make it easier for people to find, those tools. But you can also start with your local utility as well. But I would really point to us because it's easy. It's really takes you for that specific product. Sometimes even with your local utility, you kind of have to really dig into the website, right, to find it based on your equipment type. So, like I said, you can visit, our website and you already have the tool there.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. Thank you. We're talking about another tool here. This is a question from Ed, and he's trying to improve HVAC energy efficiency via minimizing outside air, and wants to know if there's an HV calculator or model that can translate outside air reduction to kilowatt hours conserved. And is that out there? Is that same calculator or model, could it also compare energy efficiencies versus 100% outside air, an economizer? I know that's a long, winding question because I was kind of reading and connecting over here. But are there any calculators out there to really help people understand that balance, the outside air and the economizer side of things?
Yeah, again, I may lean on Neri here. I'm more on the software side of things than the hardware and the calculator side of things. Yeah, what they're talking about there.
And we can also, Ed, we'll take a look at that. There might be some resources within ASHRAE that could speak to that too. That might be a great place for us to start.
Yeah, we could do some research on that, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
I would agree.
This is one I think you both might be able to relate to from Damien about materials and lead times. They're longer than ever, 6 months, maybe 1 or 2 years. How do we start to kind of get ahead of that in our planning? I know the short answer is to plan ahead, but what's the best way to kind of approach some of these delays that we're looking at, you know, the supply chain issues? What kind of recommendations are you offering to your customers, to your end users, as to how to best navigate this new world? Joe?
Yeah, so I would certainly say in your CMMS system, your procurement system, that the first thing is just make sure you know what those lead times are. So as you start, just make sure you're tracking it. And then, you know, get the list of suppliers, and there's going to be variable prices depending on the lead times. But I would start prioritizing what are those critical parts? What are the things that I absolutely know I cannot live without?
Okay.
And then we need to start adjusting our minimums. So buy more if I know that, you know, if I run out of this, I need this on the shelf. So setting those minimums and maximums and things in your inventory system is just critical. And then calculating that lead time. I should know what that is for each one of my vendors. Another thing that you can do, a lot of vendors now will have keep stock programs where you can work with them and they can guarantee a part within a particular lead time. Now, you know, you'll often pay a premium for that, but again, for those critical parts, you got to have them. So that would be another thing I'd look into.
Yeah, those are great solutions. Neri, there's a question here about gas being eliminated, perhaps, or at least tapered off in favor of electric boilers. Are you seeing that? And is that something that you can speak to in terms of offering solutions to the end user?
We're seeing that more at the local level, more
Okay.
at like cities, like on the West Coast in particular. On the states, high-level state energy codes, we're seeing improvements or stricter energy efficiency. But on to answer the question, on the electrification or driving folks towards, we are seeing it seems to be more at the local. Federal takes a little bit longer, so we haven't seen that. But it's really going to be dependent from, at least our experience has been going to be at a local level. But it seems to be more concentrated along the coasts.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a little bit more of our topics to cover here. So I want to thank everybody for the questions. Keep them coming. We'll break in again and come back a few more times. So thank you for those questions. Appreciate them. This is the part I was kind of excited about. So this is where we get to talk about the new technology innovations. We talked more than a little bit about cloud and IoT and a lot of this automation, and it's only benefiting, but we know there's more to come. We know technology pacing is faster than ever. So where would you say the biggest digital innovations are impacting HVAC the most? Neri, you know, talked a little bit about it. Let's drill down a little bit. Where do you think the biggest impact is being seen right now or will be seen soon?
I think just technology overall, it's moving towards greater intelligence, right? Where it's pretty much learning your system, if you will, and then advising you on, you know, how you can, what steps you can take, how you can improve, or how you can avoid certain issues, right? I think it's just equipment's going to get more sophisticated, but the other two is more intercommunication as well, right? It's not just, you're not just dealing with a boiler, right? You know, this boiler now is communicating with plate indirect heat exchanger, and those two are talking to each other. It's controlling the pumps, it's, you know, controlling certain valves, so forth. Or in the case of you got a water heater, you know, it's communicating with the mixing valve as well. I think you're going to see more interoperability, and then it's going to be probably, you know, and we're doing it ourselves, right? Our equipment is you know, the boiler is the brains, since it's the main heat source, right? And it's just, you know, communicating more with other things, and it's serving as a single point of contact too, which also makes installation part easier as well, right? Especially the building automation systems. You know, you're not having to, you know, I'll just, you know, refer to our product. instead of running two lines to your indirect water heaters and the boilers, just connect it to the boilers, right? I think you're going to see more of that as well, along with, more intelligence, as I mentioned, and more using the power of the cloud, right? Looking back at past data, right? To not only just making it available for troubleshooting and optimization, but it also, you can track how you've been doing over the last couple of years as well.
Yeah, that's such a value to the end user. Joe, what about you're seeing, those efficiency improvements? And again, we've touched on them, but where else are we looking to see even more improvement or gains?
Yeah, good. So I would add to what Neri was saying with, it is those IoT sensors and things. So even just contained within the HVAC system, there's more and more metrics that are being measured that are affecting what's going on in the building. But then you can think of all the other readings that we can get from things outside of the HVAC system that are also impacting our usage. So it's that big data as we kind of aggregate all of these data sources that are affecting, what my temperature needs are. The more we can put that together, and you'll hear a lot about, AI and machine learning. And there's a lot of push in the technology space to start bringing all of this data together, and add the weather data with all the IoT sensor data and things that they're getting the building automation systems. There's so many factors that can better predict what we're going to need tomorrow or the next minute or whatever it is. I think it's really that big data. So it's IoT and other systems integrating with your HVAC system, because there's a lot of context that can be brought from other sensors as well.
I think we talked about this in our pre-call earlier. We were talking about just overall automation. I mean, are you seeing, or do you think the HVAC industry at some point is going to go fully automated to the best that we can define what fully automated is right now?
Yeah, I think it continues, much more closer to that we can automate the turning things on and off to a certain extent. I will say though, and selfishly also, I don't think we'll ever get there, because we have a lot of, folks have different preferences for how they want their temperature in their office or temperature in these open work floor plans. So, to the extent that we give the end user, the building occupant, control of the temperature, it can't ever be fully automated. But we've gotten a lot smarter about how to be efficient with providing that flexibility of, I think of these large open office floor plans now where they can control the temperature pretty well on one side of the building as opposed to the other if they install the right equipment. So probably never, and I kind of hope that's the case, because I like it a little colder in my office personally.
And that's where we're going to differ. I'm all that's just me. When I, manage my own environment at the home office, I'm still complaining to the facility manager that I'm always cold.
Yeah.
Neri, what about, we're talking a little bit there about automation and some other trends, but what about hydronic heating? What are you seeing there in your area?
I would pretty much very similar to what Joe is describing. I think there's going to be more sophistication and intelligence, but to fully, it just figures out on its own and just runs without anyone interacting with it. There might be less interaction, but every building is different. Every building has different needs. There's going to definitely be a difference between new construction and an existing building that, it's going to do upgrades, but, it's not going to be the exact same. You can't just, copy, paste, repeat, really. I think we're going to have to still incorporate some flexibility so folks can operate it the way they want to and best works for them. And then we're just here to advise them, well, you can do that, and you can do it more efficiently by, following these steps or designing according to this or these guidelines.
Yeah. Well, our audience has taken our recommendation to ask questions to heart. We've got some good ones here lined up. So I'm going to take a break in our conversation and come back to some questions. And Joe, this one's coming to you from Wayne. He's asking about the CMMS program. Does it allow configuration to facilitate or manage ITM, inspection, testing, and maintenance, as defined by NFPA and adopted into, in this case, his code entities? So CMMS and ITM, how are those two coming together, and are they collaborative?
Yeah, so I would probably want to do a little more research to better answer the question. Yeah, when it comes to a lot of the integrations that we currently do, uh, a lot of that configuration takes place outside of our system, and then we receive the alarms. So that's something that, yeah, I would want to research a little more and give a better answer.
We'll definitely do that. Wayne, we'll be able to follow up with you on that. And thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Antonio's wanting to know about the trend of using integrating geothermal energy into HVAC systems for that energy efficiency, for that better consumption. Are you seeing that as a viable solution right now, or do you see that as something that's a possible solution going forward? Just wondering if either one of you want to kind of pontificate on that. It's definitely something we hear about, but are you seeing it in practice?
So I haven't necessarily, not with many of the customers I've visited. It has been a hot topic because obviously that, driving efficiency that way. I will say, having visited Iceland, yeah, some very interesting applications of geothermal technology there. So yeah, snow everywhere else, but never on the roads. So yeah, that will be a topic I'm following myself too. Very interesting. Yeah.
Mary, are you seeing anything in there, or just anything in general? Another question from Laura is about the climate change and how that's affecting our industry. I mean, maybe we can bundle a response under that umbrella as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, we are seeing geothermal applications. It's going to be really dependent on your location, but it's definitely. I think what we're going to see is more diversification of solutions, both electric, gas, or a combination of the two. Right. It's also for existing buildings, who are already hooked up to gas. Obviously, to do upgrades is going to take cost and time, but there are steps that they could take today, right, to reduce, their consumption. And efficiency is a big step there. But we are seeing pretty much, application of, high efficiency condensing boilers, with stricter standards, right? Electrification, electric boilers, heat pumps, space heating heat pumps, or for use for domestic hot water generation as well. So it's I think you're just going to see diversification across, and it's just going to be depending on your location, your budget, your space. I don't think there's going to necessarily be a cookie cutter solution either. Right? It's going to be different needs for different folks. So.
It's good to know
we are seeing those trends. Yeah.
Yeah, more options are better than less, I think, in this instance. Joe, a question from James about the difference between operational technology and information technology when dealing with BAS other automation. He's specifically asking about oversight of security systems and then the differing views between IT and maintenance teams. I imagine you might have brokered some of these conversations in Europe.
Sure. Yeah, and it's an interesting topic. So yeah, with those IoT devices and things, they'll typically be on their own network, and you'll have IT will be heavily involved in making sure to take care of that. And then on the operational side, you have your building controls folks that are trying to control all of this stuff. Fortunately for us, we don't typically have to interfere in those conversations. We're just trying to receive the alarms, as I've kind of mentioned before, from those building automation systems. Having worked mostly with facilities folks, believe it or not, as opposed to the IT folks, I'll just typically side with the maintenance folks. But no, there's lots of concerns around IT security with IoT devices. So it's definitely a serious topic for the information technology group. But yeah, so fortunately, we don't typically get too involved on the CMMS side. We're kind of receiving the output of those IoT devices rather than setting it up.
Yeah, and I do think, it always sounds like just very generic statement to say you got to have those conversations, but you have to have those conversations
100%.
And find the way that it works where everybody can feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
This is a specific question, Mary, I'm going to throw your way. We talked a little bit about Canada earlier, right? We have a question from Curtis. He says, Alberta is planning on going to more hydrogen in their gas lines. Wondering what that means for boilers and burners going forward. Any insight there?
Yes, absolutely. The good news is we're keeping an eye on all of this, ourselves as well. And the good news is if they do transition to hydrogen, existing equipment can be upgraded to operate to it. There might be some changes to burner, maybe your controls, but it's certainly possible to retrofit existing equipment. And I would expect that current equipment, new equipment like ours, just like when you're ordering your car, fuel would probably be one selection, and it would just be, you would select hydrogen, and it would just come ready with the appropriate components so that it does operate without issue. But we're keeping an eye on that. I know that's come up on discussions. I know that there's test runs in Europe as well that are occurring. Yeah, I said, let's see what direction things take. But the good news is you can retrofit. It's possible.
Oh, great. All right. We're going to jump back in. I've got a question for you both. I'd like you both to tackle this, and then we'll see if there's any more questions, and then we'll see what we have to see to wrap up. So last question is for both of you. Neri, why don't you start with your answer? It's what steps can our facility managers take with existing systems to really improve their overall efficiencies? I think a lot of people here are probably planning for changes, but they've got some, very near-term goals with their existing equipment. What kind of guidance would you provide?
So I think key is just look at where you are currently on your performance, right? Mm-hmm. And there always tends to be some level of oversizing with a lot of systems, which means you have more flexibility to kind of tune things back a little bit, lowering your set point, which would, of course, reduce the input and reduce the return water temperature of the equipment, which overall improves efficiency, right? And we've seen, folks successfully do that, right? They'll experiment a little bit, right? You can start there. If you have equipment like ours and connect to the cloud, that's another tool you can utilize there as well. The other thing too is sometimes just, are there equal balance across the plant, right? And the reason I mention that is if you have unequal balance, or it's just not balanced, one boiler might be cycling a little bit more, right? Cycling is not a good thing. You kind of really just want the equipment to, fire up and just modulate accordingly and just coast to your needs, and then just gradually come down, right? That's the ideal situation. And that, if you get to that point of operation, you can really see big improvements in your efficiency as well. So those are always good starting points. The other thing too, just going back to what was mentioned previously about, long lead times, components and such, what we've seen is a lot of folks are breaking projects or upgrades into phases. So we kind of were inspired by that with our equipment. You can put our equipment and it'll operate older inefficient equipment, and it'll only operate it as a backup really too. So you could start making small steps to the investment, right? Sometimes folks are like, I want to do it all at once. On lead times, budget, so forth. You think you could break things into phases, right? And start working your way that way. So, those are like the things, I would recommend. The other thing too is you could always consult with the manufacturer, if you got our equipment, or just to their local representative, and they'll also be more than happy, right, to pay a visit and advise, hey, these are things you could do as well.
Joe, what kind of recommendations would you have to those on our call today, to anybody who's really looking at some equipment that's existing, knowing that they're going to make this work for the near term?
Sure. I would say, utilize and leverage the technology that you have to understand where you have efficiencies and where you don't, and pursue integrations in any way that you can. So, it's interesting. We integrate with a lot of different systems that give a lot of context in terms of, energy usage in your buildings. So oftentimes we're integrating with an energy management solution. We may be integrating with the building automation systems. We're integrating with a space management system that's managing events that are happening, after hours and things. So we start to look, and you'll see there's 5, 6, 7 inputs that are affecting why a particular building might be using more energy than another. And if you don't have that context, you won't necessarily know. The other thing I would add, you know, we have a lot of work order data, capital project data. So for instance, you know, a building might have installed LED lighting. And if you didn't have that work order data to explain why this particular building is so much more efficient than this other one, you're not necessarily getting all the context of what is driving the inefficiency of one building versus another. So they seem similar, but one system might actually give you some additional knowledge of why this is more efficient or less efficient than another. So pursue those integrations. Really good CMMS providers are happy to work on those integrations with other providers. And really good installers and equipment manufacturers are happy to make those integrations available as well. So I would pursue those as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think everybody should feel good about those opportunities that Joe and Neri, you both provided us. So thank you. And I'm going to thank you both for an excellent conversation today. We've gotten through most of our questions. If we didn't get to all of your questions, no, we see them open and we'll do our best to get back and let you guys know what those answers are. Remember that this conversation will be posted soon on facilitiesnet.com/webcast, and you'll be able to go back through this. We really appreciate the time that you spent today with us, and we really appreciate our participants today. Joe, Neri, thank you so much. And also to TMA and Aerco again for these wonderful, wonderful support pieces to really let us bring this important information to our audience. So with that, I'm going to conclude today's webcast. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. And we're heading into the weekend, so make that a good one as well. And with that, we'll conclude today's webcast. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Appreciate it.